fellow travelers, and welcome to another episode of the Diverse Stars podcast, third season. My loyal listeners, thank you for your continued support. This is an amazing episode because Heather Antos boards the mothership to discuss Star Trek comics from IDW. Now, come on board with Traversing the Stars. Thanks so much for coming to Diverse Stars podcast.
Thank you, Miss Antos. Very formal. I love it.
Well, it's an honor to have you on the show. I always start with the question of inspiration. So, what inspired your love for comics, and who are your earliest influences?
Oh my gosh. I've just always loved telling stories. I mean, my mom would say I drew comics before I knew what comics were. As soon as I could hold a crayon in my hand, I was writing and drawing my own stories. Probably my earliest influences, not comics, but just like visual narrative in general, was the golden age of animation in the 90s. Growing up, my own art style. If you've ever poked around my own art, I'm very clearly inspired by like The Little Mermaid and Aladdin and that style. But narratively, I grew up watching Burt Ward, Adam West, Batman are some of my earliest memories. And between that and watching James Bond with my father, probably a little too early. But I think it worked out okay,
Well,
given my career. So
you get a phenomenal success with your career as editor and group editor. So I kind of feel like group editors are some of the unsung heroes of the comic book world, especially in larger franchises. So can you tell our listeners a little bit about group editors and why comic books should have editors on board? Because I think a lot of us do overlook that position when we plan out what we're doing with comics.
Yeah. So we'll just go down to just a plain editor, right? A plain boring old editor. Now, editors are very, very necessary and very, very needed across all publishers. So as an editor, you will be responsible for your own line of books, right? So, IDW, you might be the Sonic editor and you're overseeing everything Sonic. Godzilla, you might be overseeing everything Godzilla. And that's everything from licensor management, right? Managing that relationship and those expectations to the day-to-day duties of getting a book out the door, from soliciting pitches, getting approvals, giving notes on scripts, colors, covers, right? Staying within budget schedules, all that stuff across your line. As a group editor, not only am I editing my own line of books, right? Star Trek, as well as some originals titles. I'm also overseeing all the editors that oversee all the various licenses. So, luckily I have a very, very skilled team that I work with that I don't have to, I can just trust that, Sonic is going to get out the door and it's going to look great. My Little Pony is going to get out the door. It's going to look great, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of what I get brought in for on those is overseeing, licensor relationships, right? If there's a conflict that, I need to get brought in to help mediate, or internal advocation of various projects that, more junior editors might not have the heft, right, to advocate for internally. So it's a lot of not just comic editing, right, that goes on behind the doors. It's a lot of, as I like to say, relationship management, really. Which is very boring and not what we're here to talk about at all.
Well, I mean, you're the job you're now the group editor for Star Trek at IDW, and it's got to be complicated because once you have two titles, main titles, you got a couple miniseries. You got to keep in mind novels and TV shows that are also supposed to be in continuity. How do you balance that level of continuity and voices in the Star Trek universe for IDW?
Yeah. So luckily it's not all on me. That's where our very, very great relationship with Paramount and CBS Global Consumer Products like really, really comes in handy. A lot of it is I do get access to very fun scripts and animatics and all that fun stuff, like far, far ahead of the normal consumer out there. And so I do get a sense of what's going on. I'll hear about shows or movies or video games, what have you, before they get announced. So back in my mind, I can be like, oh, it'd be great to tell a story, and with these characters in Strange New Worlds, or I'd love to do a prequel to the Michelle Yeoh Section 31, whatever, right? And go to Paramount and they'll be like, awesome, no, or that sounds great. You know, can we make sure we steer clear of X, Y, and Z? Or we'd love it if you tell a story, you know, about this character. So it is very, very collaborative. You know, I am not expected to be the end all be all of Star Trek canon. I don't think any single person could be that. Although I'm sure there are people on the internet that would dare to disagree. But that's what the team of people that I work with, that's what their jobs are, is to, you know, collaboratively, everyone kind of has their own expertise, an area of knowledge, where we all just kind of like chip in. I get to work with Marion Cowdery and John Van Sitters, two wonderful, wonderful people who run the archives. And so like they know everything. It's kind of shocking and scary. I just had the wonderful opportunity to visit the archives when I was in LA a few weeks ago. And, you know, we're walking through one of the prop rooms and they're just like, oh, and there's the rope that Picard's mother hung herself with, right? Just like pointing out all these like random little things that like, I wouldn't have known that, you know?
Star Trek Archive. That sounds fantastic. I didn't, some reason I never just considered there's a whole building just to archive Star Trek. That there's so many Star Trek geeks who probably would have killed to be in your position at that moment.
It was really, really surreal. It was so cool. They recently had moved buildings, so they're still getting this new location together, but it's like walking into the Ark of the Covenant, right? It's that whole Indiana Jones experience where it's just like, you know, you think you're in this normal office building and then you turn a corner and it's a giant warehouse and there's every single captain's chair that's ever appeared on Star Trek, right? Just like there. And oh my God, the costumes, the rows and rows and rows of costumes from everything. I mean, they had everything from the 60s all the way, you know, to Discovery, which just wrapped. So
Oh my
wild.
God. Surprised you ever left. I would have probably been like, oh, I'm
I
leaving.
had a flight to catch. I had dogs to get back home to.
Well, the great thing about Star Trek is that you have some great talent. You have Jackson Lanzing, Collin Kelly, Chistopher Cantwell, and they have these great ideas. How do you navigate their ideas with what Star Trek licensing says you can do with the characters, and how do you make sure that there's a proper balance between what can be done and what they're going to allow to be done?
Yeah, I think the big thing for me when I came on to oversee Star Trek is I really wanted to bring Star Trek to a modern comics audience, and that meant treating the line like you would any major IP line at like your Marvel, your DC, you know, boom, Dark Horse, whatever. And that's, you know, there's a universe that exists within these comics. And for Star Trek in particular, this is a story that can only be told within the comics. You know, what can we do that is going to demand attention from readers, demand attention from fans? And that is, how do we bring apart all eras of Star Trek into one book, right? And what has been so cool about working with Paramount is they're so supportive of everything that we're doing. They love when we take big swings. And I think we've continued to take big swings for the last 2 years of telling these stories. And it's very fortunate that there happens to be a wide swath of uber Star Trek nerds in comics. I think every creator I've spoken with since taking over Star Trek is secretly like a huge Star Trek nerd, which has been really, really great. And it makes my job easy because then, you know, you're getting people who just love this world and love these characters telling the story, and it shows, right? It really resonates. So really like the hardest part of my job is then going to Jackson, Colin, and Chris and reminding them that, well, you know, not everyone is as big of a Star Trek nerd as you guys. Like, we're going to have to, you know, dumb it down a little bit for some, you know. Although my proudest moment was when I did make a reference to a TOS episode that Jackson didn't know. And I felt very proud.
Well, I've had the good fortune of interviewing both of them, And Jackson, yeah, I got to talk to Jackson and Collin. They are huge Star Trek nerds.
Nerds.
I mean,
They're nerds.
it was so it was intimidating talking to because I was like they knew so much more information than me. I thought they'd be like, nope, that's not what happened. I think
Yeah.
using the wrong terminology. I was like, oh no. But they know so much about Star Trek. One thing I love about what you're doing with Star Trek right now is that you have Star Trek and you have Star Trek Defiant. And they both have very distinct voices. And I want to use a quote that you gave in one of the on an interview. It's a good quote. You said, if Star Trek is taking things to the gods, Defiant is bringing the fight to the streets and is getting dirty. So how are you making sure that both Star Trek and Star Trek Defiant both have distinct voices from each other?
Yeah, I mean the big thing is just what their goals are, right? What are the books trying to accomplish? And because they're existing in the same line, it's how are we accomplishing each of our goals so that we can bring them back together, right? As we saw with
Hmm.
Day of Blood, we all started in the same place and we're all revolving around. And that's kind of been the mission statement from the very, very beginning. From the very beginning, Star Trek was the prophets spat Benjamin Sisko back out, right? And his whole storyline has been revolving around, what is a god? What is the responsibility of the gods? Like, should there even be gods? Like, are they causing more problems that they're solving? And we're really getting into that with this new arc that just dropped literally yesterday, as of when we're recording this, the Pleroma arc with Star Trek 19. Or have the gods distance themselves so much from the rest of the galaxy, from the rest of the universe, that they've lost their, for lack of a better term, their humanity. Meanwhile, in Defiant, we're kind of taking that same question, those same mission statements, but instead of gods, we're reflecting that back at Starfleet. Is Starfleet as wholesome and unproblematic and utopic you know as we want them to be? Like, are there issues there? How can we improve? And we've definitely seen the issues with Starfleet, kind of sending Worf and his crew on their own little Mission Impossible Black Ops run, and it's only gotten them into more and more and more trouble as the series has gone on. And yeah, it only gets, with this new arc we just announced, like it definitely gets pretty sinister. And I think it's been really cool to kind of expand the lore and paint the tapestry of this universe that has existed for 60 years nearly, and yet there's still so many questions and so many cool gaps to fill.
So the thing, we have one series dealing with gods and another one dealing with the Ragnas. How do you make sure that both series feel equally important with equal kind of stakes in them when you're dealing with that level of differentiation between the
Yeah.
characters that are at least the adversaries they're dealing with?
Yeah, it all comes down to character. I think it really all comes down to, what feels important to the characters, what is personally motivating them and everything. Because you can have galactic stakes, black hole, everything's about to end it. But if the characters we're following don't care, then I don't care.
Hmm.
Right? They're almost lenses and mirrors for ourselves and how we're supposed to be feeling about the story going on. And I think really leaning into how they personally feel about everything going on. Like, War feels very conflicted about everything going on in Defiant. Like he wants to do the right thing, but he also knows he got himself in a lot of trouble. And sometimes in order for him to do the right thing, he has to do a few wrong things. That leads to a lot of internal conflict, as we see, and it's been really cool getting to bridge the gap that we see from Worf and Voyager, from DS9, Voyager, Nemesis, all that, and how he transforms into this very enlightened, almost monk-like Klingon in Picard season 3. And we've been following a lot of where we know these characters go to help paint those stakes and paint those motivations.
And I think that's one of the coolest things that you're exploring with Star Trek, because Star Trek is often portrayed as, as this like pristine world of pristine, these perfect people, but you're dealing with like real choices, real consequences in the series. And how does that help flesh out the world of Star Trek to give them that little extra color?
It's been really cool. I mean, It's something I learned very early on in my career when dealing with, previously established IP, right? I used to work on that other Star franchise that shall not be named, but it is all about bridging the gap, finding the holes, asking the questions like, well, how does this character change between the time we last saw them and now? And how can we tell that story? Like what could they have gone through or must they have gone through, in order to end up this way? Like one of my favorite gaps that I'm begging Paramount to let me tell is, what happened with Crusher
Mm.
before Picard season 3, right? Like that's one that I've been definitely knocking on their door about. I want to, she says she hasn't talked to Picard in 20, is it 20 years, 25 years? Like, what has she been up to? I want to bridge that gap and flesh out that story. And it's the same thing we saw with Cisco and Star Trek, right? He's been gone for 3 years.
Mm.
There's a lot of animosity there with Jake and his family and all of that. And Star Trek has definitely had an absentee father problem, and hopefully we're doing what we can to like not fix it, but like also fix it.
Well, I think one of the coolest things that you're doing in Star Trek is that in May you have the Star Trek Celebrations book, which is celebrate the LGBTQIA plus community of Star Trek, and has a huge team of writers that are attached to this one. How difficult has this been to organize? Why is it so important for this to be, for Star Trek to be the voice of this?
Yeah, I think it definitely wasn't difficult to organize at all. I've once you do one anthology, you've done them all. No, it was really exciting to basically expand the Star Trek creative family. These are really cool opportunities to get new voices on these characters, get new perspectives. You know, and truly try people out for future books. Like that's what I'm hoping comes out of this is like we get some cool stories that then get to expand into books
Mm.
of their own and things like that. But no, you know I think what's so cool about celebrations and what's so cool about Star Trek's perspective, in the 24th century all the way to the 32nd century is um that pride is a protest word. Pride is a protest word. And this is not a book of protest, because in the 24th century, in the 32nd century, in the whatever century, we're being celebrated. And that's why I think Celebrations is really cool. This isn't a book that's about protesting, allowing people to exist with whatever identity they have. This is celebrating the badasses that just of these characters that just happen to already be a part of this universe. And that's what I think is really cool about this.
And I think it's so great because Star Trek does present such an inclusive world, an inclusive universe, as it were. And I really think it's fantastic that you're utilizing that to spread a world of something that it should be more culturally in the cultural conscience even more. I think that's a great thing that your book is doing. And I mean, the talent you have involved is amazing. Was it hard to convince them to get involved, or was it?
These are all people that have been begging me to write Star Trek, so it was great to finally have a spot, because if I could have 27 books a year, I absolutely would. It's just simply is not possible. But I love doing these little anthologies to get to work with people who might otherwise not have time to do like a longer series or things like that. So yeah, from Hannah Rose May, Max Passaggio, Stephanie Williams, Steve Orlando, everyone involved is just so great. The art is so good. It's almost done. The whole thing is almost coming together. It goes to print next week. But yeah, I'm really, really excited about it. And also that Kevin Wada cover that just came in that we shared off this week. Isn't that rad?
Yes, it's very cool. So, so the goal is 27 books eventually for Star Trek. That's what I heard.
Yes,
Eventually
27 books every
Yeah.
single month for Star Trek. That's what I want. Greg is dying right now.
You get started just two at a time, and you just keep on rolling, right?
Yep, exactly.
I think the other thing that you guys are doing, and I don't think I've ever heard of a book do this, and maybe I have. I don't know if I ever have. You're doing an interactive graphic novel called Star Trek Lower Decks: Warp Your Own Way, which is by Ryan North. People know him from Fantastic Four. What in the world is an interactive graphic novel, and is this physical or just digital, or how are you making this happen?
Well, it's currently being printed out of my printer right now, so I can bookmark it. So legally, I cannot say the more colloquial known term, but one could say you would choose different adventures that you could make of your own. So it's a fun, it's psychotic is what this book is. Like really, it's what it comes down to. 2 years ago I went to Ryan North and I was just like, do you want to do a choose your own adventure like graphic novel? And he's like, sure. And then 196 pages later, here we are. We might have killed Chris Manolio, who had to draw it over the last year. It's insane. I mean, it's literally, and it's literally a game you can win. There is a right way to read this book, which is very different than classic choose your own adventures, right? Classic choose your own adventures, there's just all these different ways you can go through, and isn't it fun? And Ryan, of course, had to take it to the next level because that's just how he always does things. There is an actual story that involves the interactive nature, and there is a secret correct path that if you want to get to the real ending of the book, you'll have to figure out how to play.
So I can't help but think that because you talk about like the chaos and all the stuff that's involved with that, that feels perfect for the lower deck crew. Like,
Yeah,
like,
that's
it seems like that defines them better than almost any other style.
yeah, I mean, like that's I like to do like fun, weird, experimental things in comics. You know, I've been doing it my entire career. How can we use the medium and the stories we're telling to interact and like
Hmm.
really play with what is possible within the medium? There's a lot of cool things that can be done, and I love to continue to push those boundaries. And I'm very fortunate to have creators that I get to work with that are just as crazy as I am that want to do it.
Well, I would think as an editor, talking about chaos, how does one not fall into the chaos of trying to organize a 196 page choose your own adventure style graphic novel? Caffeine.
A lot of cold brew. A lot of cold brew, a lot of that's future Heather's problem, which is now this week. So
When you came in with the idea, did you know at the moment how much chaos it was
oh,
going to for you?
I knew. I knew. I've done similar, not choose your own adventure, but one of my last Deadpool projects at Marvel was called You Are Deadpool. Al Ewing wrote it. And it was a dice rolling comic. You had to roll a die and it would tell you what page you turn to. And sometimes that page was not in that issue. Sometimes it was in an issue that came out a month from today. So I've done some pretty chaotic interactive comics before.
Well, I think like all the readers are really loving what you're doing with the Star Trek, what IDW is doing with the Star Trek universe. It's a lot of fun. We're seeing characters interact in a way that we never got to see them in any other franchise ever because of the way comic books can work. So what can the readers look forward to in the future line of Star Trek IDW coming up?
Yeah, so right now we currently have a mini series that spun out of Day of Blood and Star Trek and Defiant called Star Trek Sons of Star Trek, which is following Jake Sisko, Alexander of House Martog, Nog, Q Jr., really following the next generation of these legacy characters, the Nepo babies, as we like to call. And see how they feel about their role in all of this, and that's been really cool. Morgan Hampton, who's a new writer to Star Trek, has been killing it on that book. And I think that's all that's been announced that I can talk about, but we definitely have teased there is another event coming very, very soon between Star Trek and Defiant, and it's talk about future problems. For me, it is huge. It is ambitious. I'm so excited about it. This is definitely the biggest thing I think Star Trek Comics has ever done or attempted to do within the canon. And I I'm waiting to pitch it to Paramount to have them freak out too. But it's gonna be great. And I can't wait for everyone to learn more about it.
Can we look forward to any more additional ongoing series coming out of Star Trek?
Oh yeah, for sure. For sure, for sure. But I can't say any more yet
No
about that.
worries. When you can, come back on the show, please. I would love to talk.
There you go. Absolutely.
All right. Thank you so much, Miss Antos. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk with you.
Thank you.
Have a great day. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Birds of Stars podcast. Do something better the algorithms by liking and subscribing. Sure to turn for the next episode when Michelin Sisti boards the mothership, discuss the 1990 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle film and the television series Dinosaurs. Till next voyage, travel on.